cutting-edge tech and risk management strategies in regulatory compliance.
Hello everyone. Welcome to our next panel discussion. My name is Arina and I'm representing Sumsub today. And the topic that we're touching today is very important for the whole sphere because as industry evolve, so do the challenges associated with regulatory compliance as well. And I'm also glad to introduce these team panelists. Here we have Romina Camilleri, the partner of Camilleri and Dimech Consultancy, Jaime Debono, iGaming Academy, Tim French, of course, the solution consultant in Greco, and of course, David Yatom, the general counsel of Soft2Bad. And I guess in order to save us more time for a fruitful discussion, we should start with the questions. So I guess I'll start with Jaime.
Hello.
So from your perspective, how does the iGaming industry uniquely approach regulatory compliance compared to other sectors?
I think the short answer is it doesn't. No, just kidding. I mean, look, it's hard to sort of summarize it because if you look across the spectrum and you sort of you were to have a more of a collective view, it's a bit of a challenge, right? You have such individual requirements per jurisdiction. You have big markets like the US, which go even deeper per state. But I have to say, we've been in the compliance game for just coming up to 10 years now, right? A big part of what we do as a business is focus around regulatory compliance. And naturally, I'm a bit biased. The more compliance, the better it is for business from a certain perspective, but also, the better it is for the industry itself. There is such a thing as over-regulation, and I'm sure, the fine panelists here have a lot to say about that. But, I think there's a lot of maturity in recent years, especially with new markets regulating. We've been actively involved in the re-regulation of 𝐂𝐭, and we've been seeing a lot of advancements working out over there. But there's more of a balance, I would say. There's a more balanced approach. It's not regulators against the industry or regulators against the providers and operators. It's a little more harmonized now. So that's saying a lot without saying too much, but that's how we're seeing it at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And currently, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the iGaming industry from a compliance perspective?
Sorry, that was for me, that question?
Yes, of course.
There's a follow-up. Can you ask the question again? Sorry.
What do you see as the biggest challenge from a compliance perspective currently?
So, look, I think there's two sides to regulation and compliance, right? There's what companies need to do from an internal perspective in terms of managing and educating their workforce and ensuring that there's a level of compliance which is implemented at the operational level. But again, from our seat, a lot of that has to do with education. I think that we're working with many companies here, and we've seen big advancements on how companies are implementing the compliance. It's not a case of here's a policy, read it, but rather it's a lot more of an engaging approach to how it's implemented. And then on the other side, from a player's perspective, I think that there's still a lot of challenges there. I think that in some cases, regulation is safeguarding, but it's also safeguarding the operators to their benefit, if that makes sense. And I think that the way that certain controls come into play around deposits and withdrawals, there's a bit of play around that, and sometimes the regulation can be used against the player rather than the other way around. So, that's how we're seeing it at the moment.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I totally agree. And I guess, Romina, could you please add also some comments, like what are the most significant challenges for now, and particularly in relation to emerging technologies?
So I believe that the most significant challenges are in terms of data protection and cybersecurity. So when it comes to data protection, being that companies operate in more than one jurisdiction, it doesn't mean that all data protection laws across the jurisdictions are the same. So making sure that you are compliant in all the jurisdictions is extremely important, but it is very challenging. Because the laws sometimes overlap or sometimes they are contradicting. So that is quite challenging to make sure that you're compliant whilst at the same time you're either not collecting unnecessary data or you're not collecting enough data to comply with the regulations. So, and in terms of cybersecurity, with the advancement of technology, there's always cyber threats, and it doesn't stop basically, so you always have to be one step ahead, and with that comes challenges of costs, making sure that you have everything in place and making sure that all the measures in place are doing what they should be doing. So I think those are the main challenges, and I think that is why it's very important that you conduct regular audits, external audits, even internal audits, to make sure that if there are any gaps within the infrastructure, you make sure that you find those prior to either having an audit by the regulator or by having a data breach. So I think those are the most important aspects at this point.
Of course, yeah, that's absolutely the truth. And I guess I can also ask you one more aspect here. How do you think, how is important currently the collaboration between the compliance consultants and the regulators?
I think it is extremely important. So over the years, I have worked on many systems, so without going into the actual number of years so that I don't divulge my age, but it has been, I have been working on different systems, and there's always that one thing that I say, so if the system had this implemented, it would make my life much easier. I would save time. I can work on different things. So if something takes me 6 hours and having something added on to it takes 2 hours, that means that I'm saving 4 hours, so I'm being more efficient, more cost effective. So I think it's very important that when systems are being and solutions are being developed, compliance and legal are involved in the development, because you can only get something out there which is better than what there already is on the market by having experts in the field contributing towards your solution.
Yeah, of course, thanks a lot. And I guess, David, you can also add some comments because what strategies and technological tools perhaps do you employ currently to foster positive and collaborative relations with the regulatory bodies, to ensure comprehensive compliance across all the operational issues that the company may have?
Good. Yeah, I think it's working. Technological efforts, right? You see, that's the pure example. I think we spoke about it quite a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of new developments that are currently now taking place that we're, as an organization, I think Christos spoke about it before, the importance of B2B providers and platform providers integrating tools and elements right now that will utilize the technology, such as AI or other elements that would expedite, make more efficient the way that we deal with customers, the way that we deal with regulations as KYC and customer supports, AMLs and regulations. And we at SoftBet have implemented those tools, and we're trying to implement it going forward. AI is something that everybody's speaking about, and I don't want to say it as as to use it very generally, but this is something that we really do take into account, and we do see ways for that to improve the way that we act in accordance to regulations. We use this in order to expedite our KYC and AML procedures. We use AIs and other tools to make sure that we're flagging players that might be more riskier and present a regulatory risk for ourselves and our partners. And that's something that we utilize across the board. And we're going to see those tools coming up as they come along. We're going to implement them more and more. I think the challenge right now is just making sure how we align with what do we have right now existing with whatever regulation that will come in place in the future. And I think we've kind of mentioned it before. Even when it comes to regulation, and the previous panel has discussed this topic quite briefly as well. There has to be a balance, right? So we can be the ones that will implement those tools and apply everything, but to some extent, over-regulating this creates the opposite. Creates really the opposite, because you can impose a lot of restrictions, you can use technology in order to make sure that it works properly and that we're flagging everything, but at some point it comes at a commercial cost. It comes at the business itself, us as B2Bs or as B2Cs. We need to look at what have we done with this technology and how do we use it in a strict manner, and how does that impact business. And the regulator needs to see this as well, because if you impose too strict of a restriction of regulations, no matter what technology will you use, it will eventually come at a cost of the business, and then we'll pull back. So balance is important.
Of course, and currently from both legal and compliance perspective, what innovative technologies are being utilized to address the most pressing issues?
So I think the most pressing issues right now we see from a regulatory perspective is obviously player protection and AML. From a player protection perspective, as I said before, we use at SoftBit, I can testify ourselves specifically, we use a lot of AI to flag and basically pinpoint riskier players. I think it comes to an advantage from two perspectives, because once we do that, first of all, we manage to identify those individuals, but we also save on the actual workforce, on the individuals, on the humans that would otherwise have to be implemented and used in order to identify those individuals, and free them up in order to deal with the same individuals that we have pinpointed. I think that's probably one of the most crucial elements of reusing technology for.
Yes, absolutely. Team, what about you? What specific tech do you believe are game changers currently for risk management in regulatory compliance, and why?
Yeah, so I think David picked up on quite a lot of that as well. Just the use of AI is going across the board in pretty much all suppliers right now, right? Like Seon are using it, Sumsub are using it on Fido. I think one thing to be kind of not cautious from an operator side of things, but it's like the AI is only ever as good as the data going into it. You've got to have solid data and solid parameters and the rest of that kind of scope to make sure that the AI models are going to give you the most accurate sort of results possible. From a buyer side of things as well, what we're doing at Greco is working on kind of a different side of that and looking at the gameplay data, looking at gameplay aggregates to kind of take away. Weirdly, I'm talking biasly about something unbiased. It doesn't matter who the person is, it's trying to identify the fraud from the gameplay aspect. Like, is the betting behavior, is the betting pattern something that flags up as fraudulent? So then, even if something has been missed from that registration side of things, you can still intervene at the earliest point possible. And I think with all of this as well, though, the most important things are having real-time automations. Like, whatever products you're using need to work in real time, and they need to have automated actions that can happen in real time as well, so you can intervene as quickly as you possibly can. And a lot of people are doing this now, but I think there's still a lot of progress that can be made.
Yes, and May you also perhaps give some more information about how has technology transformed also the compliance training education in the industry?
Yeah, I guess I can speak from a supplier side of things, but Jamie will probably be able to pick up on other bits better than I can. But I think from an operator's perspective, if you're choosing a supplier, make sure they've got a solid partner management team. I make sure that they have a team that can educate the users as the product develops. So they're not just a third-party supplier that you're using. They're an extension to your risk team. They're part of your risk and fraud team. They're educating around the trends. They're showing you the best practice of the product as the product develops, because all these products are going to keep on developing to be more and more precise. But if you don't lean on the supplier to tell you how to get the most out of their product, you're going to fall behind, and then it's going to be that extra cost for what? To say that you've ticked a box that you're using this product to be compliant, but you're not using it properly? Like, again, what's the point? What's the value in that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are those scenarios where it's a tick box exercise, but what we found is that we've kind of had this collective approach to education, and a lot of the clients that we work with, they feed into our sort of knowledge pool, right? So the products and the training and the material that we're actually rolling out today is not the same material that we're rolling out in 6 months, right? So there's a lot of evolution in our content, and it's continuously changing because of the industry itself. Not because of the regulators per se, but also because of the operators and the platform providers and the service providers who feed into that knowledge pool, right? So that's something that we've been developing for quite some time, and I think it's one of our more exciting products because it's giving back to the community that was initially feeding in the knowledge. So it works well.
Yeah, I guess so. And I think that there could be one more question from my side. For instance, like, how do you see the future of the technologies here? Like, what should be the next step and how to prepare to them, something like that? Tim, perhaps you should be the one.
What are the next steps of the technology in general? I don't know. There's so much to this. I think, again, just purely looking from a supplier side of things, and I don't know how it's done, I don't know how we work together better, but it's to look at interoperability between these different products that you have to enrich the data for each other while still keeping your core value, so you're not overstepping the mark of the other tools that are there. But operators should be using multiple tools to identify risk and fraud. How can you get them to talk to each other? How can you, at that very first point of registration, be able to talk to another product to say, we think this is heightened risk. Can you now look at the heightened risk from the gameplay side of things, so you can then kind of spend less money further down the line? Because again, that's what's going to be, from what you were saying, David, about compliance tools are great, but there's a commercial aspect to it, and regulation is great, but at the end of the day, the operation still needs to make money. So how can you make sure that it's economically viable?
Look, it's a very difficult question, and I'll follow up on what Tim said. I think that's probably one of the most important things, and it also goes to the collaboration with the regulators themselves. I think we can implement technologies from now until forever. Right? We can do everything, but as long as it doesn't make commercial sense, what's the use of implementing this? Because I can cross-check all of the operators for gambling problems, for example, but that would strike off hundreds of thousands of players. Would that make a commercial sense? Probably not. If I make regulations and I use technology in an efficient way that will encourage operators to actually use them, that's what makes the difference. Jamie spoke about a tick box exercise when it comes to trainings and regulations. But if you educate operators that they will see a benefit from education, and it could maybe expedite processes or place them in a different positions with regulators or further licenses, then they would like to do it. it's not a question of just implementing technology. It's a question of what you do with it from a business perspective. I don't think that there's anybody here, I'm saying it, but everybody would, I'm sure that everybody would agree with me. We're all here to make money, okay? We want to make money in a responsible way so the industry will be sustainable going forward. And we want to encourage competition that is fair. Because if I don't comply with regulation, I don't implement the technology, but then again, there's other operators that just act irresponsibly, I'm not placing myself in a reasonable competition with them. And what's the sense of using anything, let alone those high-tech regulations or tools, because it just doesn't make sense. So it needs to be balanced. And I think that's the most important part. Whatever we do, whatever we care to implement, needs to be taken into account against the commercial benefit and the industry benefit.
Thanks a lot. As we're out of time currently, thanks for your expertise and for your views. I guess that we are up to something very new with respect to risk management and compliance as well. Thanks a lot.